I never thought life could turn out like this, standing in the middle of the Willowbend Country Club, surrounded by people who were supposed to be celebrating me. My name's Julian Hayes, and today's my 35th birthday. At least, that's what Mia told me when she insisted on throwing this party. I'd always been a simple guy, didn't need much to be happy. A quiet life, a good woman by my side, maybe a couple of kids running around someday. That's all I ever wanted. Willowbend seemed like the perfect place to build that dream. It's one of those small towns you see in movies, with tree-lined streets and friendly faces, the kind of place where everyone knows your name. When I met Mia Grant 3 years ago, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. She was stunning, long dark hair, bright green eyes, and a smile that could light up a room. But it wasn't just her looks. She had this sharpness about her, a way of seeing the world that pulled me in. Plus, she came from money. Her parents, Clive and Rosalind Grant, were big shots around here. They owned half the businesses on Main Street, hardware stores, cafes, even the little movie theater with the flickering sign. Me? I was just an outsider, a guy who'd clawed his way up from nothing. No fancy family name, no inheritance, just a knack for tech and a lot of hard work. I'd built my own consulting business from the ground up, helping small companies with their websites and systems. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. When Mia said she loved me for that, for my grit and my drive, I believed her. I thought we were a team. So when she suggested this birthday party, I didn't think much of it. "Let me spoil you for once," she'd said, brushing her hand across my cheek. "You deserve it, Julian." I'd smiled and nodded, figuring it'd be a nice night. Maybe a cake, some drinks, a few laughs with friends. I didn't need anything big, but Mia loved a good show. The Willowbend Country Club was her family's territory, polished wood floors, chandeliers dangling from the ceiling, waiters in crisp white shirts gliding around with trays of champagne. I'd been here before for her dad's business dinners, always feeling a little out of place among the suits and the small talk. But tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was about me. I put on my best jacket, a dark blue one Mia picked out for me last Christmas, and drove over with a grin on my face. The parking lot was full, cars lined up like they were waiting for something big. I figured she'd gone all out, maybe invited some of the guys I worked with or the neighbors we'd had over for barbecues. I walked up the stone steps, nodded at the doorman, and stepped inside. The room was packed, just like I'd expected. I saw familiar faces, Tom from the hardware store, Lisa who ran the bakery, even my buddy Mike who'd helped me fix my truck last month. They were all dressed up, smiling, raising glasses like they were toasting something. I felt a little swell of pride in my chest. Mia had really pulled this off. I scanned the crowd for her, ready to pull her into a hug and thank her for making me feel so special. But then I stopped. Something wasn't right. The air felt heavy, like everyone was holding their breath. There were no balloons, no streamers, none of the usual birthday stuff. The big table in the center of the room caught my eye. No cake, no presents, just a stack of papers and a suitcase. My suitcase. The one I kept in the upstairs closet at home. My stomach twisted. I looked up, and there she was, Mia, standing tall and cold, her arms crossed. Next to her was some guy I didn't recognize, slick-looking with a suit that probably cost more than my car. Her parents were there too, Clive with his stern jaw and Rosalind with her pinched lips, staring at me like I was dirt on their shoes. The crowd went quiet. I felt every eye in the room on me, boring into my skin. "Happy birthday, Julian," Mia said, her voice flat as a board. Or maybe I should say goodbye. My heart started pounding, but my mind raced faster. What the hell was going on? I took a step forward, my hands clenching at my sides. This wasn't a party. This was a setup, and I wasn't about to let it end the way they wanted. I'd spent years building a life here, pouring everything I had into this marriage, this town. Mia knew that. She knew how much I'd given up to be with her, how I'd turned down job offers in the city because she wanted to stay close to her family. I'd trusted her, loved her, and now she was standing there like I was nothing, like I'd been some kind of hired help she could toss out when she was done. The guy next to her shifted, putting a hand on her shoulder, and I felt a hot spike of anger shoot through me. Who was he? What had she been doing behind my back? I glanced at the suitcase again, my clothes probably stuffed inside like garbage. The papers on the table, divorce papers, maybe? Or something worse. Clive stepped forward, his voice booming across the room. "It's time for you to go, Hayes. You've overstayed your welcome." The crowd murmured, some looking away, others leaning in like they were watching a damn soap opera. I could feel the heat rising in my face, the humiliation they wanted me to drown in. But I wasn't going to give them that. I straightened up, met Mia's eyes, and forced a smile. "A farewell party, huh?" I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Well, let's make it one they'll never forget." My hand slipped into my pocket, brushing against my phone. They thought they had me cornered. They thought I'd just slink away. But I'd learned a thing or two about survival. And I wasn't leaving without a fight. I stood there in the middle of the Willowbend Country Club, my heart hammering in my chest like it was trying to break free. The air felt thick, suffocating, as every pair of eyes locked onto me. Mia's words still echoed in my head. "Your job is done. Leave now." Cold and sharp, like she'd rehearsed them. The giant red banner overhead screamed, "Farewell Party," in bold letters, mocking me. No balloons, no birthday cake, just a table with my suitcase and a stack of papers that I knew spelled trouble. My suitcase, packed and ready, like they'd planned this down to the minute. And Mia, standing there with that stranger, his hand resting on her arm like he owned her. Her family flanked her, Clive with his smug grin, Rosalind with her icy stare, and a dozen other faces I recognized from town, all part of this twisted show. I could feel the weight of their judgment, their expectation that I'd crumble, grab my bag, and slink out the door like a whipped dog. My hand stayed steady, though, even as my mind raced. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. Not tonight. Not ever. The room was dead silent, waiting for me to react. I could see Mike in the corner, shifting uncomfortably, probably wondering why he'd even shown up. Lisa from the bakery had her hand over her mouth, like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. These were people I'd lived with, worked with, laughed with, and now they were here to watch me get tossed out like yesterday's trash. I looked at Mia again, searching her face for something, anything, that might explain this. We'd been married for 2 years. 2 years of building a home, sharing a bed, talking about our future. She'd always said she loved how I wasn't like her family, how I wasn't obsessed with money or status. Was that all a lie? Her green eyes met mine, but there was nothing there. No guilt, no softness, just a wall. The guy next to her smirked, adjusting his tie like he was bored. Who was he? Some rich buddy of her dad's? A lover? The thought made my stomach churn, but I pushed it down. I wasn't going to let them see me crack. Clive cleared his throat, stepping closer, his voice cutting through the quiet. "You heard her, Julian. Time to go. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Harder for who? For them? I almost laughed. They'd turned my birthday into a public execution, and he had the nerve to act like I was the inconvenience. I glanced at the suitcase again. It was the old brown one I'd brought when I moved in with Mia, the one she'd teased me about, because it was scratched and worn. Seeing it there, packed up and waiting, hit me harder than her words. They'd gone into our house, my house, and rifled through my stuff while I was out, clueless, thinking I was headed to a party. How long had they been planning this? Days? Weeks? I thought about the last few months, her late nights, her excuses, the way she'd stopped touching me. It all clicked, but I wasn't ready to process it yet. Not here, not in front of them. I took a slow breath, feeling the anger bubble up, hot and steady. My fingers flexed at my sides, itching to do something, anything, to wipe that smug look off Clive's face. But I wasn't a fighter, not with my fists. I'd always been the guy who thought things through, who found a way to turn the tables. And right now, they thought they had me beat. They thought I'd just bow my head and walk away. I let my gaze sweep the room, taking in the crowd, some curious, some uncomfortable, some outright enjoying the drama. Then I locked eyes with Mia again and smiled. Not a big grin, just a small, tight one, the kind that says I've got something up my sleeve. "A farewell party," I said, my voice steady, loud enough to carry. "That's what you're calling this? Fine. Then let's start the real farewell party." I could see her flinch, just for a second, before her mask slipped back into place. Clive frowned, his bushy eyebrows knitting together, and Rosalind muttered something under her breath. They weren't expecting me to talk back. They thought I'd be too stunned, too broken. But I'd spent my whole life being the underdog, growing up with nothing, scraping by, building my business from scratch. I didn't fold easy. My hand slipped into my pocket, brushing against my phone. I'd always been good with tech, better than most people knew. It was how I'd made my living, how I'd caught Mia's eye in the first place when I fixed her dad's company website years ago. And lately, I've been using it for something else, something they didn't know about. I'd been watching, listening, collecting. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Because I'd felt her pulling away, and I wasn't dumb enough to ignore it. Then let's start the real farewell party, I repeated, softer this time, almost to myself. I could feel the shift in the room, the way people leaned in, waiting to see what I'd do. Mia's new guy, whatever his name was, crossed his arms, like he was daring me to make a move. Clive took another step toward me, his face red now, like he was ready to drag me out himself. "Don't be stupid, Hayes," he growled. "Take your bag and get out." I didn't budge. My mind was spinning, piecing together what I could do, right here, right now. I didn't have everything ready, not yet. But I had enough. Enough to make them sweat. Enough to show them I wasn't the pushover they thought I was. I pulled my phone out, holding it up so they could see it, and watched their expressions change. Mia's eyes narrowed. Clive froze. Rosalind's hand went to her necklace, clutching it like a lifeline. "You think you're in control here," I said, keeping my voice calm, even as my pulse raced. "You think you can just kick me out and that's the end of it. But this isn't your party anymore. It's mine." I tapped the screen once, just to test them, and saw Mia's jaw tighten. She knew I was up to something, but she didn't know what. Not yet. The crowd was buzzing now, whispers spreading like wildfire. I could feel their energy shifting, some of them starting to doubt the Grants, starting to wonder if maybe I wasn't the fool they'd painted me as. I lowered the phone, slipping it back into my pocket. "You want me gone?" I said, looking straight at Mia. "You're gonna have to work for it." And with that, I turned toward the table, grabbed the stack of papers, and started flipping through them. Divorce papers, just like I'd guessed. But there was more financial stuff, things with my name on them I didn't recognize. My blood ran cold, but I kept my face blank. They weren't just kicking me out. They were setting me up, and I was going to make them regret it. I stood there in the Willowbend Country Club, the stack of papers still in my hands, my eyes scanning the words that felt like a punch to the gut. Divorce papers, sure, but also documents with my name tied to things I'd never signed, bank accounts, property deals, stuff that screamed trouble. Mia and her family weren't just dumping me. They were trying to bury me. The crowd around me was buzzing, a low hum of whispers and shifting feet. But I tuned it out. My mind was racing back, piecing together the last few months, the signs I'd ignored because I didn't want to believe it. I'd always trusted Mia, loved her even when she started pulling away. But now, looking at her standing there with that stranger, her parents backing her up like a wall of steel, I knew I'd been blind. Not anymore. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd seen this coming. Not the party, not this exact moment, but the shift, the coldness. And I'd done something about it. I'd been digging, watching, recording. And tonight, that was going to save me. It started a few months ago, maybe 4 or 5. Mia began acting different. She'd always been busy, her family's businesses kept her running around, but it got worse. She'd come home late, hair messy, eyes avoiding mine. "Work," she'd say, waving me off when I asked. "Just family stuff." I'd nod, pour her a glass of wine, try to keep things normal. But then she stopped sleeping in our bed. "I toss and turn too much," she'd said, moving to the guest room down the hall. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, hearing her voice through the walls, soft, secretive, talking on the phone. I told myself it was nothing, that I was overthinking it. But my gut wouldn't let it go. I'm not the jealous type, never have been. I'd built my life on logic, on figuring things out. Tech was my world, after all. So I started paying attention. Little things at first. How she'd lock her phone when I walked into the room. How her work excuses didn't add up. She'd say she was at her dad's office, but I'd drive by and see the lights off. Then there were the looks Clive gave me, sharp and dismissive, like I was in the way. Rosalind stopped inviting me to their fancy dinners. It all piled up, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. So I did what I do best. I got smart. I didn't confront her, didn't yell or beg for answers. I went quiet, started digging. I'm good with computers, better than Mia ever realized. She thought I just fixed websites, but I knew how to track things, how to find what people tried to hide. I put a little recorder in the guest room one night when she was out, nothing fancy, just a cheap thing I picked up online. I felt sick doing it, like I was crossing a line, but I had to know. The first time I listened, it was just her laughing, talking to someone about plans. Then I heard his name, Caleb Morris. I didn't know him then, but I found out quick. He was her dad's investment partner, some slick guy who'd moved to town a year ago. I'd seen him at a couple of Grant family events, always in a suit, always smiling too much. The recordings kept coming, Her giggling with him, whispering about me like I was a joke. "Julian's so clueless," she'd said once. "He'll never see it coming." My hand shook when I heard that, but I kept going. I hacked into her email, not proud of it, but I did. Found messages between her and Caleb, flirty at first, then worse. Meetings at hotels. Pictures. I wanted to throw up, but I saved it all. Then I went deeper. I started looking at Grant Holdings, her family's company. Mia had put my name on some of their accounts when we got married, said it was a partnership, a way to tie me into the family. I'd been flattered, signed where she told me to. Dumb move. Now I saw why. Shell companies, fake land deals, money moving through accounts with my signature on them. They were using me as a shield, a fall guy if things went south. I found Clive's voice on one recording, bragging to Caleb about how they'd clean it up with my name. "Hayes won't know what hit him," he'd said. I backed it all up, every file, every clip, on a hard drive I kept hidden in my truck. I didn't know what I'd do with it, not exactly. I just knew I wasn't going to let them win. Not after everything I'd given them, my trust, my time, my life. Tonight, standing here with those papers in my hands, it all made sense. The farewell party wasn't just about kicking me out of the marriage, it was about kicking me out of everything, leaving me to take the blame for their mess. I looked up at Mia, her face hard and unreadable. The guy next to her, Caleb, I realized now shifted, watching me like I was a bug he wanted to squash. Clive was still glaring, Rosalind clutching her pearls like I'd offended her delicate sensibilities. The crowd was restless, waiting for me to break. But I wouldn't. I set the papers back on the table, slow and deliberate, letting them see I wasn't rattled. My mind was clear now, sharper than it had been in months. I'd been preparing for this, even if I didn't know it had happened tonight. Every snide remark Mia made, every secret call she thought I didn't hear, I'd caught it all. I had proof. Evidence. Power. "You think you've got this all figured out?" I said, keeping my voice low but firm, loud enough for Mia and her family to hear. "You think I'm just gonna walk away and let you pin this on me?" Mia's eyes flickered, just for a second, like she wasn't sure what I meant. Clive snorted, crossing his arms. "You don't have a choice, Hayes," he said. "It's done." I smiled again, that same tight smile from before. "That's where you're wrong," I said. "I've been ready for this. For months." I patted my pocket where my phone sat, loaded with everything I'd collected, recordings, emails, screenshots. They didn't know yet, but they would. This wasn't just a breakup. This was war. And I'd been building my weapons in the dark, waiting for the right moment. Tonight was it. My trigger. I took a step back, letting the tension hang, feeling the crowd lean in. They wanted a show? I'd give them one. But it wasn't going to end the way the Grants expected. Not by a long shot. I stood there in the Willowbend Country Club, the air crackling with tension, my hand resting on my phone like it was a loaded gun. The crowd was a blur of faces, some shocked, some confused, all waiting to see what I'd do next. Mia's eyes were locked on me, narrow and suspicious, like she was finally realizing I wasn't the pushover she'd counted on. Caleb stood beside her, his smug grin fading just a little. Clive and Rosalind were still in their firing squad formation, thinking they had me cornered with their little farewell party stunt. My suitcase sat on the table, the papers next to it screaming their plan. Divorce me, dump me, pin their dirty deals on me. But they didn't know what I had in my pocket. Months of work, months of watching them when they thought I was asleep or too dumb to notice. Recordings, emails, proof. And now, with every eye in the room on me, it was time to pull the trigger. I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to turn their game upside down. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle on my shoulders. My fingers slid over my phone, pulling it out slow and deliberate. The giant screen on the wall behind the table, usually used for golf tournament scores or wedding slideshows, was about to become my weapon. I'd hacked into the club's system a while back, just a little side project when I was bored one weekend. Never thought I'd use it like this. With one tap, I connected my phone to the projector, and the screen flickered to life. A grainy video popped up, loud and clear, Mia and Caleb, tangled up in our bedroom, laughing like it was some big joke. Her voice cut through the speakers, sharp and familiar. "Julian's out tonight. We've got ours." Gasps rippled through the crowd. I didn't look at her, didn't need to. I could feel her stare burning into me, hot and furious. Another tap, and the video switched. Clive this time, sitting in his office, his voice booming as he bragged to someone off-screen. "We've got the land locked up. Paid off the inspector last week. Hayes' name's on the deed. He'll take the fall if it blows up. More gasps, louder now. The room was alive, buzzing with shock and whispers. I turned to Mia, keeping my face calm, even as my heart pounded. You planned this, she hissed, her voice low but shaking. For months, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. And now it's live-streamed. Over 500 people watching online, last I checked. Her eyes went wide, and I saw the panic hit her. Clive lunged forward, his face red as a tomato. Turn that off, Hayes. You've got no right. But I held up a hand, cutting him off. I've got every right, I said. This is my party now. The door swung open then, and Dana Roth walked in, my lawyer, my ace in the hole. She was a short woman, barely 5 feet, but she carried herself like she owned the place. Her dark hair was pulled back tight, and she had a folder in one hand, court orders in the other. The crowd parted as she strode up to me, her heels clicking on the polished floor. Mr. Hayes is here to renegotiate everything, she said, her voice cool and sharp, aimed straight at the Grants. And you'll want to listen. The room exploded into chaos. People were talking over each other, some pulling out their phones to record, others just staring like they couldn't believe it. Rosalind grabbed Mia's arm, whispering something frantic, but Mia shook her off, her face pale. Caleb took a step back, like he wanted to disappear. I watched it all unfold, feeling a strange calm settle over me. This was it, the moment I'd been building toward without even knowing it. Dana set her folder on the table, flipping it open to show a stack of papers. Legal stuff? Evidence I'd handed her last week when I finally admitted what I'd found. You thought you could use Julian as your patsy, she said, looking at Clive. But he's been smarter than you from the start. We've got recordings, financial records, emails. Enough to bury you. Clive sputtered, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. This is outrageous. You can't. Oh, we can, Dana cut in. And we will. I stepped forward, picking up where she left off. You wanted me gone, I said, my voice steady, carrying over the noise. You wanted me to take the blame for your scams, your lies. But I've got it all. Every word you said, every move you made. And now the whole town knows. I pointed at the screen, where Clive's voice was still looping, admitting to payoffs and fraud. People were filming it, sharing it. I could see the numbers ticking up on my phone. 700 viewers now, 800. Mia's hands were shaking, and for the first time, she looked small, like the weight of her own mess was crushing her. Julian, she said, her voice cracking. You don't have to do this. I almost laughed. You did this, I said. You and your family. I'm just showing everyone the truth. Dana tapped the court orders on the table. These freeze your assets, pending investigation, she said to Clive. In this one, she held up another paper, grants Mr. Hayes immediate access to all joint accounts you put in his name. He's not leaving empty-handed. The crowd was roaring now, some cheering, some shouting questions. I caught Mike's eye across the room. He gave me a nod, like he was proud. Lisa was smiling, her phone out, filming the whole thing. I'd gone from the guy they pitted to the guy fighting back, and they were eating it up. Clive tried to argue, his voice hoarse. This is slander. I'll see you. Go ahead, Dana said, smirking. We've got more than enough to counter it. I watched him deflate, his shoulders slumping. Rosalind was crying now, quiet little sobs, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not after what they tried to do to me. I turned back to the screen, letting the footage play. Every second was another nail in their coffin, and I wasn't stopping it. My phone buzzed, 1,000 viewers now. Word was spreading fast. I leaned in close to Mia, keeping my voice low so only she could hear. You should have known better, I said. I don't break easy. She didn't say anything, just stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Maybe she was. I stepped back, letting Dana take over, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. We're just getting started, she said to the Grants. You'll hear from us, and the police very soon. I stood there, watching it all, feeling the power shift. They'd thrown me a fake party to get rid of me, but I'd turned it into their downfall. And I wasn't done yet. I watched the Willowbend Country Club erupt around me, the chaos I'd unleashed swirling like a storm. The giant screen still flickered with Clive's voice admitting to fraud, Mia's affair with Caleb playing on a loop for anyone with a phone to see. Over 1,000 people were watching online now, and the room was a mess of shouts, gasps, and flashing cameras. My lawyer, Dana Roth, stood beside me, cool as ice, her court orders spread out on the table like a winning hand. My suitcase and those fake papers were still there, but they didn't matter anymore. This wasn't about me leaving. It was about them losing. Mia's face was white, her hands clenched into fists, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Caleb had backed off, hovering near the edge of the crowd like he could slip away unnoticed. Clive was yelling, his voice hoarse, while Rosalind tried to pull herself together, dabbing at her tears with a napkin. The crowd was feeding off it, some horrified, some cheering, all of them hooked on the drama. And me? I felt alive, like I'd finally taken back what they'd tried to steal. Dana flipped through her folder, her voice cutting through the noise. Mia, you've been misusing joint assets for months, she said, holding up a bank statement with my name on it. You funneled money into shell companies, thinking Julian wouldn't notice. But he did. And under state law, that entitles him to a spousal transfer. 30% of Grant Holdings is his now. The words hit like a bomb. Mia lunged at me, her nails out like claws. You think you're clever? She spat, her voice shaking with rage. I stepped aside, keeping my cool, letting her stumble past me. No, I said, meeting her glare. Just thorough. She froze, breathing hard, like she couldn't believe I'd turned the tables. Clive tried to storm out, shoving through the crowd, but the doors swung open again, and 2 police officers walked in. Mr. Grant, one of them said, his voice flat. You're wanted for questioning in connection with corporate fraud. Let's go. Clive stopped dead, his face going slack. Reporters were already there, snapping photos, their flashes lighting up the room like fireworks. I picked up the divorce papers from the table, grabbed a pen from Dana, and signed them right there, my terms attached, not theirs. The crowd surged, people pushing closer, yelling questions at the Grants. Is it true? Someone shouted. Did you set him up? Another voice called. I didn't answer. Just let the evidence speak for itself. Dana handed me a copy of the signed papers, her eyes gleaming. You've got them on the ropes, she said, low enough for only me to hear. They thought this marriage was a financial strategy, a way to use you as their front. Now they're paying for it. I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. I'd walked in here thinking I was getting a birthday party, and instead, I'd been handed a knife in the back. But I turned it around, stabbed them with their own blade. Rosalind tried to shout over Dana, her voice shrill. This is nonsense. We'll fight this. But Dana just smiled, calm and deadly. Go ahead, she said. We've got more where this came from. I looked at Mia again, watching her unravel. She'd always been the strong one, the one who held it together, but now she was cracking. Julian, she said, softer this time, almost pleading. You don't have to destroy us. I tilted my head, studying her. You destroyed us, I said. The second you started lying, sneaking around, planning this. I'm just cleaning up the mess. Her lips trembled, but she didn't argue. She couldn't. The truth was out there, playing on that screen, spreading across the internet. Caleb muttered something to her, but she ignored him, her eyes still on me. I didn't care about him. He was just a pawn in their game, same as I'd been. But I wasn't a pawn anymore. I was the one calling the shots. The cops moved in, guiding Clive toward the door. He didn't resist, just shuffled along, his head down. Rosalind followed, still clutching her napkin, her sobs louder now. The reporters swarmed them, microphones out, questions flying. Mr. Grant, did you falsify records? Mrs. Grant, what about the charity funds? I stayed where I was, letting it happen. The crowd was splitting, some trailing after the Grants, others clustering around me and Dana. Mike pushed through, clapping me on the shoulder. Man, I didn't know you had this in you, he said, grinning. You just took down the whole damn family. I shrugged, managing a small smile. They took themselves down. I just lit the match. Dana tapped the table, drawing my attention back. This is just the start, she said. We've got the asset freeze, the equity stake, and the police on their tail. They're done. I looked at the divorce papers in my hand, my signature fresh on the page. I'd added terms, half the house, full control of my business accounts, no alimony for her. She'd get nothing but the wreckage she'd made. It felt good, signing it, like I was cutting a chain I hadn't known was there. The room was still loud, people talking over each other, phones buzzing with notifications. I caught Lisa's eye. She gave me a thumbs up, her camera still rolling. The live stream was at 2,000 viewers now, maybe more. Willowbend was small, but this was going viral, spreading beyond the town limits. I'd wanted a quiet life, but they'd forced me into this fight. and I was winning. Mia took a step toward me, her voice barely audible over the noise. Julian, please. We can talk about this. I shook my head, folding the papers and tucking them under my arm. Too late, I said. You wanted me out. Now you're out. She flinched, and for a second, I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered the recordings, her laughing with Caleb, calling me clueless, planning this night. I remembered the suitcase, the way they'd humiliated me in front of everyone I knew. No, I didn't feel bad. I felt free. The cops were at the door now, Clive in tow, Rosalind trailing behind. The reporters kept snapping pictures. The crowd kept buzzing. I turned to Dana. What's next? I asked. She grinned, closing her folder. We burn it all down, she said. Legally, of course. I nodded, feeling the fire in my chest grow. They'd started this war, but I was going to finish it. One way or another, the grants were done, and I was just getting started. I walked out of the Willowbend Country Club into the cool night air, the chaos of the farewell party still ringing in my ears. The police had hauled Clive away, Rosalind trailing after him with her head down, while reporters chased them with cameras flashing like lightning. Inside, Mia was left standing there, shell-shocked, Caleb nowhere to be seen. My phone buzzed in my pocket. 3,000 viewers now, maybe more, watching the Grants' empire start to crumble live online. Dana clapped me on the back as we hit the parking lot, her grin sharp and satisfied. You did it, Julian, she said, her voice low but proud. They thought they could bury you, but you just flipped the whole game. I nodded, feeling the weight of the signed divorce papers in my hand. My terms locked in. 30% of Grant Holdings was mine now, their assets frozen, and the police sniffing around. The town was buzzing. Willowbend hadn't seen a shakeup like this in years. Half the people couldn't believe I'd taken down the mighty Grants, me, the outsider with no fancy name or deep pockets. But others, the ones they'd stepped on over the years, were starting to talk. And I wasn't done yet. The next few days were a blur. Word spread fast, too fast to keep up with. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Old clients, neighbors, even guys I hadn't talked to since high school, all wanting to know what happened. I didn't answer most of them. I was too busy with Dana, locked in her office downtown, plotting our next move. We'd started with the live stream, but that was just the spark. Now we were pouring gas on the fire. Class action lawsuit, Dana said, spreading papers across her desk. We've got at least a dozen former Grant employees ready to sign on people they fired or cheated out of wages. Plus, small business owners they strong-armed into bad deals. I leaned back in my chair, taking it in. I'd known the Grants were ruthless, but hearing it laid out like that, names, dates, dollar amounts, made it real. And the audits? I asked. She smirked. Full financial audits on Grant Holdings kicked off this morning. State investigators are all over it. Those shell companies with your name? They're unraveling fast. I thought about the town, how it had been under their thumb for so long. Willowbend was picture perfect on the outside, neat lawns, cozy shops, kids riding bikes down Main Street. But the Grants had owned it, quietly squeezing people dry. I'd seen it myself, working with clients they'd bullied into overpriced contracts or shady loans. I'd kept quiet back then, figuring it wasn't my fight. Now it was. Dana slid a list across the desk, offshore accounts tied to Clive, millions stashed away. Found these yesterday, she said. Rosalind's charity funds too, supposed to help single moms, but most of it went in her personal shopping sprees. I shook my head, disgust curling in my gut. They're done, I said. Not yet, Dana replied. But we're close. Mia tried to play the victim card that week. I saw her on the local news, standing outside their mansion, eyes red like she'd been crying. I've been betrayed too, she said, her voice shaky. Julian's twisting everything. I just want to move forward. I turned off the TV, tossing the remote on the couch. She could cry all she wanted. Caleb had bolted, probably halfway across the state by now, and her reputation was trash. No one bought it. Not after the recordings, the emails, the proof I'd blasted out for the world to see. I'd moved out of our house by then, crashing at a cheap motel on the edge of town. Didn't need much, just a bed, a shower, and a place to think. The house was mine now, legally, but I couldn't stay there. Too many memories, Mia cooking dinner, us laughing on the porch, all of it tainted now. I'd sell it later, once the dust settled. People started coming to me, quiet at first. A guy named Marcus stopped by the motel one morning, hat in hand. He'd worked for Grant Holdings as an accountant until they fired him for asking too many questions. I saw what you did, he said, shifting on his feet. I've got files, stuff they told me to shred. Can I help? I nodded, told him to talk to Dana. Then there was Sarah, who ran a flower shop Clive had forced into a lease she couldn't afford. They threatened to shut me down, she said, her voice trembling. I've got nothing left to lose. By the end of the week, we had a small army, people the Grants had crushed, ready to fight back. I wasn't the outsider anymore. I was the guy who'd stood up, the one they could trust. It felt strange, being that person, but it fit. Dana and I kept pushing. The asset freezes hit hard. Clive's fancy cars got impounded, their mansion locked down. Rosalind's charity was shut pending investigation, and the town started turning. I'd walk down Main Street and get nods, smiles, even a good job, pays from Tom at the hardware store. The Grant's name was poisoned now. People stopped shopping at their stores, canceled contracts. Mia called me once, late at night, her number popping up on my phone. I let it ring, watching it until it went to voicemail. Julian, we need to talk, she said, her voice small. Please. I deleted it. She didn't get to beg now, not after what she'd done. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. Done with her, with them, with being their tool. By Friday, the legal counteroffensive was in full swing. Dana filed the class action, naming me as lead plaintiff. This isn't just about you anymore, she said, handing me the paperwork. It's about everyone they hurt. I signed it, feeling the weight of those names, Marcus, Sarah, dozens more. We were tearing down the Grants' empire, brick by brick. The audits uncovered more fake invoices, tax evasion, payoffs to local officials. The police were building a case, and Clive wasn't getting out of it this time. I sat in my motel room that night, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how far I'd come. A week ago, I'd been the guy walking into a trap, thinking I was getting a birthday party. Now I was a threat, a name they feared. I wasn't finished, not by a long shot. The Grants had ruled this town for years, but their time was up. And I was the one holding the match, ready to burn the rest of it down. I sat in the Willowbend courthouse, the wooden bench hard under me, the air thick with tension and the faint smell of old paper. The room was packed, every seat taken, people standing along the walls, whispering and craning their necks to see. 2 weeks had passed since the farewell party, and now we were here, facing off in court. Mia sat across the room, her green eyes hollow, her hands folded tight in her lap. She'd filed to contest the divorce terms I'd signed that night. My terms, the ones that gave me the house, 30% of Grant Holdings, and left her with nothing. Bad move on her part. Dana was next to me, calm and ready, a stack of evidence piled on the table in front of us, recordings, emails, ledgers, all the dirt I'd collected over months. I adjusted my tie, feeling the eyes of the town on me. This wasn't just about me and Mia anymore. It was bigger. The Grants' former employees were there, wearing little pins with JH on them, a quiet show of support. Even the new mayor, a guy who'd waited years for the Grants to slip, sat in the back, watching. I took a deep breath and leaned forward, ready to fight. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair pulled into a bun, banged her gavel, and the room went quiet. Mia's lawyer stood first, a slick guy in a suit that screamed money. He started spinning a story, how I'd fabricated evidence, how Mia was a victim of my vendetta, how the divorce terms were unfair. I almost laughed. Dana didn't even flinch, just waited her turn. When she stood, the air shifted. Your Honor, she said, her voice clear and steady, we're not here to argue stories. We're here with facts. She held up the first piece, a recording of Mia and Caleb, dated 6 months back, plotting to move money through accounts with my name. The courtroom speakers crackled to life, her voice filling the space. Julian won't check. He trusts me. The judge's eyebrows went up, and I saw Mia sink lower in her seat. Dana kept going, pulling out emails between Clive and Mia, laying out how they'd used me as a front for their shady deals. This wasn't a marriage, Dana said. It was a setup, and Mr. Hayes has the proof. I watched the crowd react, nods, murmurs, a few gasps. The pins with my initials glinted under the fluorescent lights, and I felt a swell of something pride, maybe, or just relief that people were finally seeing the truth. Mia's lawyer tried to interrupt, claiming the recordings were illegal, but Dana shut him down fast. All obtained within Mr. Hayes' legal rights on his own property, she said, sliding a document to the judge. Next objection? The guy sat down, red-faced. Then it was my turn. Dana nodded at me, and I stood, feeling every eye in the room lock onto me. I wasn't nervous. Maybe I should have been, but I wasn't. I'd spent months in the dark, gathering this stuff, and now it was time to say it out loud. I cleared my throat and started talking. I didn't want this, I said, my voice steady, carrying across the room. I came to Willowbend for a quiet life. I met Mia, fell in love, thought we were building something real. But she used me. Her family used me. They put my name on their scams, cheated on me, disrespected me in our own home. I trusted her, and she laughed about it behind my back. I paused, letting that sink in. The judge was listening, her pen still. I didn't fake anything, I went on. I recorded what I heard, saved what I found, because I had to protect myself. They planned to kick me out, pin their mess on me, and walk away clean. That farewell party was their big finish. But I turned it around. And I'm not sorry. I glanced at Mia. She wouldn't look at me, her head down, her hands twisting in her lap. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. Dana took over again, laying out the financials, how Mia had drained our joint accounts, how Grant Holdings' profits were tied to fraud, how my 30% stake was fair under the law. Mr. Hayes isn't asking for revenge, she said. He's asking for what's his. The judge nodded, scribbling notes. Mia's lawyer tried to fight back, dragging out bank statements he claimed showed I'd agreed to everything. Dana countered with timestamps, proof I'd been at work when those transfers happened, proof Mia had forged my signature. It was airtight. I sat back down, watching it unfold, feeling the tide turn. The town was listening, not just the judge, but everyone. People who'd known me as the quiet tech guy were seeing me different now. The pins, the nods, the way Marcus caught my eye from the back and grinned, it all said the same thing. I wasn't alone. The hearing stretched into the afternoon, then the next day. Mia took the stand, her voice shaky, trying to sell her victim act. I didn't know what my father was doing, she said, tears in her eyes. Julian's blowing this out of proportion. But Dana didn't let it slide. She played another recording, Mia laughing with Clive about keeping Julian in the dark. The tears dried up fast, and the judge's face hardened. By the end of week 2, it was over. Public opinion had flipped, newspapers ran headlines like Grant's exposed and Outsider strikes back. The mayor even shook my hand outside the courthouse one day, saying, "You've done us a favor, Hayes." I didn't care about favors. I cared about winning. The courtroom was quieter now, the big moment's done, just waiting for the judge to wrap it up. I looked around, taking it in, the people wearing my initials, the empty spot where Clive should have been if he wasn't in custody, Mia sitting alone, her lawyer whispering in her ear. She'd lost her edge, her power. The Grants weren't untouchable anymore. They were broken, laid bare for everyone to see. I'd walked in here a target, but I was walking out something else. Not a hero, maybe, but a man who'd fought and won. Dana leaned over, her voice low. "She's got nothing left to throw at us," she said. "This is yours." I nodded, feeling the weight lift just a little. The war wasn't over. Clive and Rosalind still had their own battles coming, but this part was mine. The judge banged her gavel again, calling for order, and I sat up straight. Whatever she said next, I was ready. They tried to take everything from me, but I'd taken it back. And then some. I sat in the Willowbend courthouse, the same hard bench under me, the same crowd packed in tight. But today felt different. It was the final day, the moment we'd been building toward for weeks. The judge's gavel hung in the air, ready to drop, and every eye was on her. Mia sat across the room, her face pale, her hands gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing holding her up. Her lawyer had run out of tricks. Dana had dismantled every lie, every excuse, with cold, hard proof. My recordings, my emails, my months of quiet work had paid off. The town was watching, not just in the courtroom, but online, on the news, everywhere. The Grants' empire was crumbling, and I was the one who'd swung the hammer. I adjusted my jacket, feeling the weight of the divorce papers I'd signed that night at the club, my terms locked in. This was it, the verdict, the fall, and I was ready to walk away with my head high. The judge cleared her throat, her voice cutting through the hum of the room. "After reviewing the evidence and testimony," she said, "I'm prepared to rule." I leaned forward, my hands resting on my knees. Dana gave me a small nod, her eyes steady. "On the matter of the divorce," the judge went on, "Mr. Hayes' terms stand. The marital home is awarded to him in full, as is 30% equity in Grant Holdings, per spousal transfer laws, and the documented misuse of joint assets by Mrs. Hayes." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Mia's head dropped, her shoulders shaking. "Mrs. Hayes' request for alimony is denied," the judge added, her tone flat. "No further financial claims will be entertained, given the evidence of fraud and infidelity." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. It was done. She got nothing, no money, no stake, No sympathy. Just the mess she'd made. The judge wasn't finished. As for Grant Holdings, she said, flipping a page, the 30% equity awarded to Mr. Hayes remains intact. The company is under state investigation, and all assets remain frozen pending outcome. That hit hard. Clive and Rosalind weren't here, already indicted and dealing with their own legal hell, but this sealed it. Their empire was locked down, and I owned a chunk of it. The crowd buzzed louder, people whispering, some clapping. I caught Marcus' eye. He flashed a grin, his JH pin shining. The judge banged her gavel, calling for quiet. This court finds no merit in the contest filed by Mrs. Hayes, she said. Case closed. The bang echoed, final and sharp, and just like that, it was over. I stood up slow, feeling the room shift around me. Dana clapped me on the shoulder. You're a free man, Julian, she said, her voice warm. And a damn powerful one. I nodded, managing a small smile. Free. It didn't feel real yet, not after everything, but it was true. I'd walked into that fake party a month ago with nothing but a suitcase and a setup, and now I was walking out with my life back, plus some. Mia didn't move at first, just sat there, staring at the table. Her lawyer muttered something, but she waved him off. The crowd was breaking up, people spilling into the aisles, talking over each other. Reporters were already outside. I could see their shadows through the windows, waiting to pounce. I didn't care. Let them write what they wanted. The truth was out. I started toward the door, Dana at my side, when Mia's voice stopped me. Julian, she called, soft and broken. I turned, meeting her eyes. She looked small, fragile, nothing like the woman who'd stood so tall at that party. Can we talk? She asked, stepping closer. The room quieted a little, people watching. I studied her, those green eyes I used to love, now red and tired. Part of me wanted to hear her out, to see if she'd apologize, explain, anything. But then I remembered the recordings, her laughing with Caleb, plotting with Clive, calling me clueless. I remembered the suitcase, the banner, the way she tried to ruin me. Forgiving and forgetting are different, I said, keeping my voice steady. I forgive you, Mia. But this chapter's over. She flinched, like I'd hit her, but I didn't wait for a reply. I turned and kept walking, the weight lifting with every step. Outside, the air was crisp, the sun low in the sky. Reporters swarmed me, microphones in my face. Mr. Hayes, how do you feel about the ruling? What's next for Grant Holdings? I held up a hand, stopping them. I feel good, I said, simple and true. And what's next isn't up to me, it's up to the law. I pushed through, Dana clearing a path, and climbed into my truck. We drove off, leaving the chaos behind. I didn't look back. The house was mine now, but I wasn't going there, not yet. Too many ghosts. I've been staying at the motel, and that was fine for now. I needed space, time to figure out what came next. Later that night, I sat on the motel bed, the TV on low. The news was all about the Grants, Clive, and Rosalind's indictments, the company's collapse, my win in court. They showed a clip of me leaving, my words looping. I feel good. I turned it off, leaning back against the headboard. My phone buzzed, Mike, texting congrats. Lisa sent a picture of her bakery with a sign, Hayes Day Special, free coffee. I smiled, something real and warm breaking through. Willowbend was changing. The Grant's shadow was fading, and people were stepping into the light. I'd done that. Not alone. Dana, Marcus, Sarah, all the others had helped, but I'd started it. I'd stood up when they thought I'd fall. I thought about Mia one last time, her voice echoing in my head. Can we talk? No, we couldn't. She'd made her choice, and I'd made mine. I wasn't the guy who walked into that club anymore, clueless, trusting, hoping for a quiet life. I was something else now. Stronger. Prouder. I had power, not just the equity or the house, but the kind that comes from fighting and winning. The Grants were done, Clive and Rosalind locked in their own mess, Caleb gone, Mia left with nothing. I'd walked out of that courtroom free, but more than that, I'd walked out with my future. I tossed my phone aside, closed my eyes, and let myself rest. Tomorrow was a new day, and for the first time in a long time, it was mine to shape. I stood in the driveway of my new place, a small house on the edge of Willowbend, far from the Grant mansion and all its ghosts. The paint was peeling a little, the yard overgrown, but it was mine, bought with cash from my tech consultancy, no strings attached. It had been a month since the courtroom victory, and I left the motel behind, ready to start over. The house Mia and I shared was up for sale, too big, too full of memories I didn't want. This new spot was simple, quiet, just what I'd always pictured before everything went sideways. I hefted a box of books from my truck, feeling the sun on my back, the air clean and sharp. Willowbend was still buzzing from the grants fall. Clive and Rosalind were neck-deep in legal trouble, Mia keeping a low profile. But for me, it was time to rebuild. Not just a house, but a life. I wasn't the guy who'd walked into that fake party anymore. I was something new, and I was going to make it count. The first few days were busy. I unpacked, fixed a leaky faucet, mowed the yard until it looked halfway decent. My consultancy was picking up too. Old clients came back. New ones called after seeing me in the news. The guy who took down the grants, they'd say, half joking, but it stuck. I didn't mind. Work kept me grounded, gave me something to focus on besides the past. Dana stopped by one afternoon, her car pulling up with a crunch of gravel. "Nice place," she said, stepping out, a bottle of wine in hand. "Housewarming gift." I took it, grinning. "Thanks. You sticking around to drink it?" She laughed, following me inside. We sat on the porch, the wood creaking under us, and talked about what came next. "The class action's moving fast," she said, sipping her glass. "More people signing on every day. And the audits, Grant Holdings is toast." I nodded, staring out at the trees. "Good," I said. "Let it burn." That night, after she left, I got an idea. I'd been thinking about it since the courtroom, something to turn all this mess into something good. I called Dana the next morning. "What if we started a platform?" I said. "For whistleblowers, financial victims, people like me, like Marcus and Sarah. A place to share proof, get help." She didn't hesitate. "I'm in," she said. "Let's do it." We got to work fast, me on the tech, her on the legal side. I built the site from scratch, simple but solid, a place where people could upload files, connect with lawyers, find resources. Dana lined up a team, pro bono attorneys, a couple of investigators. We launched it a week later, calling it Open Ledger. The first post was mine, a short video, just me in my new living room, talking about what the grants did and how I fought back. "If they've hurt you," I said, looking into the camera, "you're not alone. We can help." It took off. Within days, we had dozens of submissions, stories, documents, people the grants had screwed over spilling it all. Marcus signed up, posting those files he'd saved from his accounting days. Sarah shared her lease nightmare. Others came too, farmers, shop owners, even a teacher who'd lost her pension to one of Clive's scams. I spent nights reading through it, my laptop glowing in the dark, feeling the weight of their trust. Dana and I hired a few people to keep it running, accountants the grants had fired, a developer I knew from an old gig, an architect whose project Clive had tanked. We turned a chunk of the old grant estate, seized in the audits, into a community center. Single dads got job training there. Startups got mentors. I'd walk through it some days, seeing people laugh, work, rebuild, and it hit me, Willowbend was changing. Not all at once, but steady, like a tide shifting. The town itself was different now. People didn't whisper about the grants anymore. They talked loud, unafraid. Main Street felt lighter, shops picking up without Clive's shadow over them. I'd get waves when I drove through, smiles from folks I barely knew. Lisa at the bakery started Haze Blend, coffee, strong and no nonsense, she said, like me. Mike helped me fix up the house, hammering nails and cracking jokes about my superhero phase. I laughed it off, but it stuck with me. I wasn't a superhero, just a guy who'd had enough and fought back. But if that's what they saw, I'd take it. One evening, Marcus showed up with a check, a loan I'd given him to start his own firm, paid back early. "Couldn't have done it without you," he said, shaking my hand. I shrugged, pocketing it. "You did the work," I told him. I just opened the door. I kept busy, but Mia lingered in my head sometimes. I hadn't seen her since the courthouse, that last "Can we talk?" echoing when I least expected it. I heard she'd moved out of the mansion, renting a place downtown, keeping her head down. Part of me wondered if she'd try again, show up with more tears or excuses. But she didn't, and I was glad. I didn't hate her, not anymore. I'd let that go, burned it out with the rest of their mess. This was about moving forward, not looking back. Open Ledger grew, hundreds of users now, stories pouring in from beyond Willowbend. Dana got calls from bigger firms, wanting to partner, but we kept it ours. "This is for the little guys," she said, and I agreed. We built something real, something that mattered. One night, I stood in my yard, the stars bright overhead, the house quiet behind me. I thought about that party, how I'd walked in expecting cake and walked out with a war. Now, the war was won, the ashes cooling. I'd rebuilt, not just a home, but a purpose. The community center was packed most days, kids running around, guys like me finding their footing. The town believed again, not in the grants, but in themselves. I'd been the match, sure, but they were the fire. My phone buzzed, Dana, texting about a new case. I smiled, heading inside. The man who'd stumbled into that fake birthday was gone. This was me now, rooted, steady, ready for whatever came next. You ever find yourself in a moment so surreal, you wonder if you're the main character in someone's bad sitcom? That's how I felt sitting in that courtroom, staring at Sophia's smug face. I'd braced myself for the usual jabs, the "you never did enough," or "I was the only one trying." But what came out of her mouth was a masterpiece of cruelty. You're like a workhorse, Ryan. Easy to ride, but absolutely useless in the long run. The courtroom actually chuckled. I could feel the heat rising in my neck, spreading to my ears, and settling somewhere in my chest like a lit furnace. My fists clenched under the table, my nails digging into my palms, but I didn't flinch. She wanted a reaction, and I wasn't about to give it to her. See, Sophia always had a knack for cutting deep, for twisting the knife just right. It wasn't enough to leave the marriage. She had to take my dignity with her. That comment, workhorse, wasn't just an insult. It was a summary of how she'd seen me for years, despite everything I'd done. I worked 2 jobs for a while, trying to keep up with her lifestyle. I skipped nights out, didn't upgrade my car, and wore the same tired suit for 3 years because Sophia needed the latest of everything. And now I was a workhorse. I scanned the room. Her lawyer smirked. The judge's face remained impassive. The gallery? They were entertained. To them, this was a midday drama, something to discuss over lunch. But to me, this was 6 years of my life boiled down to a punchline. What hurt wasn't just the words. It was that they laughed. I'd spent years thinking I was building something with Sophia, only to realize she'd been watching from the sidelines, waiting to find the next best thing. It wasn't just her betrayal. It was her mockery of the man I'd been while I was with her. When the judge called for a short recess, I took the opportunity to step out. The walls of the courtroom felt like they were closing in, and I needed to breathe. Outside, I leaned against the cool stone pillar and closed my eyes. For the first time in months, I let myself feel the weight of it all. The humiliation, the anger, the sheer disbelief that someone I'd loved so deeply could strip me down so mercilessly. And yet, there was a part of me that found it oddly liberating. I know that sounds crazy, but hear me out. Sophia had finally said out loud what she'd probably been thinking for years. The gloves were off, and I didn't have to pretend anymore. No more walking on eggshells, no more second-guessing myself, and no more trying to fix something that had been broken for a long, long time. I straightened up and looked at my reflection in a nearby window. I didn't see a workhorse. I saw someone who was tired but still standing. Someone who had more strength than Sophia had ever given him credit for. And as I adjusted my tie and prepared to go back in, I made a decision. If Sophia wanted a show, I'd give her one. But it wouldn't be the kind she was expecting. You know what's funny? You can look back at your own life and pinpoint all the moments you should have seen it coming. I stood in that courtroom, letting Sophia's words roll off me like water, but inside my head, I was rifling through years of memories. The signs were all there. I just didn't want to see them. When we first met, Sophia had this energy about her. She walked into a room, and everyone noticed. She was elegant, confident, and had this magnetic laugh that made people want to stay just a little longer. I wasn't immune. I was smitten. When she said yes to my awkward dinner invitation, I thought I'd won the lottery. The first year of marriage? It was great, at least, that's what I told myself. We traveled, we laughed, and we dreamed big. I wanted a life with her. She wanted a life that looked good on Instagram, but I didn't see the difference then. I thought I could give her everything she wanted if I just worked hard enough. So, I worked. Boy, did I work. Early mornings, late nights, skipped weekends. I poured every ounce of energy into providing for her. She wanted the condo downtown? I found a way to make it happen. She wanted designer handbags? Sure, I tightened my belt. When she decided she was too good for her office job and wanted to pursue her passions, I supported her without question. But here's the thing. I don't think Sophia ever saw me as her partner. To her, I was a stepping stone, a way to get to where she wanted to be. She didn't see the sacrifices I made, the things I gave up. All she saw was the result, the condo, the handbags, the nice dinners. And when the novelty wore off, so did her affection. Looking back, I can't pinpoint the exact moment she started to drift away. Maybe it was the first time she came home late without an explanation. Maybe it was the weekend trips she started taking with her friends. Maybe it was the way she'd roll her eyes when I asked how her day was. But there was one moment I'll never forget. It was our 3rd anniversary. I'd planned this whole evening, dinner at the restaurant where we had our first date, followed by a surprise weekend getaway. I'd saved for months. When I told her about it, her response was, "That's it? That's it?" 3 years of love, effort, and devotion boiled down to 2 words that gutted me. Of course, I didn't say anything. I laughed it off, told her I'd try harder next year. That's what I did back then. I excused her. I excused the growing distance, the dismissive tone, the way she'd started prioritizing her social media over our conversations. I didn't want to admit that the woman I married was changing. Or maybe, she'd always been this way, and I was just starting to see it. But the real kicker came a year later when I stumbled across a receipt for a piece of jewelry I didn't recognize. It wasn't for me. She didn't even bother to hide it. When I confronted her, she laughed and said, "It's just a gift for a friend." A friend. Right. I should have walked away then. I should have packed my things and left. But I didn't. I told myself I could fix it, that if I just worked a little harder, loved her a little more, I could bring her back. What a fool I was. By the time I realized the truth, it was too late. She was already 1 foot out the door, her sights set on someone else, Benjamin, the wealthy investor, with a sports car and a villa in the hills. She thought he was her ticket to the life she deserved. Standing in that courtroom, I could see it so clearly. I'd been nothing more than a stepping stone for Sophia, a means to an end. And now that she thought she was done with me, she didn't even have the decency to leave quietly. But she underestimated me. She thought I'd crumble under her insults, that I'd let her walk away with everything I'd worked for. What she didn't realize was that the years of being dismissed, disrespected, and undervalued had forged something in me she didn't expect. Strength. She wanted to tear me down, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. Not now. Not ever. When the judge called us back in, I took a deep breath and stepped into that courtroom, not as the man Sophia thought she could destroy, but as the man who was ready to reclaim his story. The judge asked Sophia's lawyer to present their arguments, and of course, they started with the same tired script. I was lazy, uninspired, and a burden in the marriage. The workhorse comment got thrown in again, followed by a smug glance from Sophia. She leaned back in her chair like she'd already won. But here's the thing about underestimating someone. It always backfires. When my lawyer, Claire, stood to speak, I felt a calm settle over me. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Claire started by dismantling their narrative, point by point, using facts to paint a very different picture. Bank statements, receipts, and records of my long hours and sacrifices. All of it laid bare for the court to see. But the real moment came when Claire turned to me and said, "Ryan, would you like to address the court?" This was my chance. I stood up, adjusted my tie, and walked to the center of the room. My palms were sweating, but my resolve was solid. Sophia called me a workhorse. I began, my voice steady. And I suppose she's not entirely wrong. I worked hard, harder than she'll ever know, to build the life we shared. But what she won't tell you is that the sacrifices I made were never for me. They were for us. For her. I paused, scanning the room. The gallery was silent, their earlier chuckles replaced with rapt attention. Even the judge leaned forward slightly. "Since Sophia enjoys metaphors, let me give you one of my own," I continued. "Yes, I'm a workhorse. But not because I'm weak or expendable. It's because I carry weight, real weight, and I never faltered, no matter how heavy it got." Then, I did something that caught everyone off guard. I took off my suit jacket, unbuttoned my shirt, and slid it off my shoulders. The collective gasp that filled the room was almost cinematic. My torso was a map of scars and calluses, each one telling a story. Years of manual labor, long shifts, and sacrifices etched into my skin. These were the marks of someone who had given everything and asked for nothing in return. This, I said, gesturing to the scars, is what being a workhorse looks like. While Sophia was busy spending money on things she didn't need, I was out there making sure she had them. And yet, she stands here today and mocks me as if I've done nothing. I turned to face her, locking eyes with her for the first time. Her smug expression was gone, replaced with something I'd never seen before: shame. Here's the truth Sophia doesn't want you to know, I said, my voice rising. The reason we had a condo downtown? My overtime hours. The vacation she bragged about on social media? My savings. The freedom she enjoyed while I worked 2 jobs? My sacrifice. And now, she wants to strip me of everything I have left, as if I'm nothing more than an obstacle in her path to a new life. I could feel the room shifting. The gallery wasn't laughing anymore. They were listening. But here's the thing, I said, my voice firm. I'm not an obstacle. I'm a survivor. And I won't let anyone, not even the woman I once loved, take away what I've built. I turned to the judge, who was watching me with an unreadable expression. That's all I have to say, I finished, buttoning up my shirt and walking back to my seat. The rest of the session was a blur. Sophia's lawyer fumbled, trying to regain their footing, but it was clear the damage had been done. Sophia herself sat frozen, her earlier confidence shattered. When the judge called for another recess, Claire turned to me and whispered, "That was brilliant." I didn't feel brilliant. I felt exposed, vulnerable. But I also felt something else: free. For the first time in years, I'd spoken my truth, and it felt damn good. Sophia thought she could control the narrative, but she forgot one crucial detail. The truth doesn't stay buried forever. You could practically hear a pin drop when the judge called the courtroom back into session. Sophia's lawyers shuffled their papers, clearly rattled. The smug confidence they'd walked in with earlier had melted away. Sophia, too, sat stiffly in her chair, her fingers drumming anxiously on the table. The courtroom laughter from before was a distant memory. And me? I sat there, calm, arms folded, watching them scramble to pick up the pieces. For years, I'd been on the defensive in our marriage, always trying to make things right, always feeling like I wasn't enough. But this time, I wasn't playing their game. This time, I was the one in control. Claire, my lawyer, didn't waste a second. She stood up, her voice sharp and confident. "Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence that directly contradicts the narrative the opposing counsel has attempted to construct." She handed a thick stack of documents to the judge. Bank statements, expense reports, receipts, all of it meticulously organized and highlighted. I'd spent weeks digging through every account, every bill, and every piece of paperwork to make sure we had it all. "Here we have a clear record of Mr. Ryan's financial contributions to the marriage," Claire continued. "He paid the mortgage, covered household expenses, and even funded Sophia's personal ventures, expenses she conveniently omitted from her testimony." The judge flipped through the documents, his expression growing darker with each page. Claire wasn't done. "Additionally, Your Honor, we have evidence that Mrs. Sophia diverted funds from their joint account to a private account she kept hidden from Mr. Ryan. These funds were used to finance her personal lifestyle, including extravagant vacations and purchases unrelated to the marriage." That was when the color started draining from Sophia's face. "And finally," Claire said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade, "we have proof of Mrs. Sophia's infidelity." At that, Sophia's lawyers shot to their feet. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant to the case." The judge raised a hand, silencing them. "Continue, Ms. Claire." Claire nodded and handed over another folder. Photos, hotel receipts, and correspondence between Mrs. Sophia and her lover, Benjamin. The affair wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was a financial one. Mrs. Sophia used joint marital funds to support this extramarital relationship. Sophia's lawyers slumped back into their seat. The fight had left them. Sophia, on the other hand, looked like she wanted to vanish into thin air. Her face was pale, her hands clenched in her lap. I could see her biting the inside of her cheek, trying to keep her composure, but the cracks were showing. The judge looked up from the folder, his gaze heavy. "Mrs. Sophia, Do you have anything to say in response to these allegations? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. For once, she had nothing to say. I'll admit, watching her squirm wasn't as satisfying as I thought it would be. It didn't erase the years of pain or the nights I'd spent wondering what I'd done wrong. But it did give me something I hadn't felt in a long time. Vindication. Sophia's lawyer tried to recover, offering weak rebuttals and excuses, but it was clear they were fighting a losing battle. The evidence was overwhelming, and the judge wasn't buying their attempts to shift the blame. As the session came to a close, the judge announced that a decision would be made soon. He gave Sophia a pointed look. Mrs. Sophia, I suggest you reflect on your actions and their consequences before we reconvene. She nodded silently, her eyes fixed on the table in front of her. Walking out of the courtroom, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Relief, anger, sadness. It all swirled together in a way I couldn't quite process. But as I stepped into the fresh air outside, one thought stood out above the rest. For the first time in years, the truth was on my side. When we returned to court the next day, the air felt different. It was heavier, like everyone in the room knew something monumental was about to happen. Sophia sat at her table, her posture stiff, her eyes avoiding mine. Her lawyer whispered furiously in her ear, gesturing to the pile of evidence Claire had submitted the previous day. Me? I sat there, calm and collected, even if my insides were churning with anticipation. This wasn't just about the money or the divorce anymore. It was about my dignity, my story. And I was ready to make sure everyone in that room understood exactly who they were dealing with. The judge began with a recap, laying out the evidence Claire had presented. It is clear that there were significant contributions made by Mr. Ryan to the marriage, both financial and otherwise, he stated, his voice steady but firm. I glanced at Sophia. Her hands were clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Good. Let her feel the weight of this. Claire stood, her voice calm, but with an edge of steel. Your Honor, my client has been painted as a failure in this marriage, a so-called workhorse who contributed little. The evidence, however, tells a very different story. Mr. Ryan not only carried the financial burden, but also supported Mrs. Sophia in her personal endeavors, often at great personal cost. The narrative presented by the opposing counsel is not only false, it is insulting. The judge nodded, motioning for Sophia's lawyer to respond. Your Honor, her lawyer began, we acknowledge the financial contributions made by Mr. Ryan. However, we maintain that the emotional climate of the marriage was detrimental to Mrs. Sophia's well-being, and this, combined with Mr. Ryan's alleged neglect, led to the breakdown of the relationship. Alleged neglect. That one stung. Claire didn't miss a beat. If we're speaking of neglect, Your Honor, let's not overlook the documented evidence of Mrs. Sophia's actions, specifically, her diversion of funds and her extramarital relationship. Emotional climate aside, the financial and personal betrayals committed by Mrs. Sophia significantly contributed to the breakdown of this marriage. The tension in the room was palpable. Even Sophia's lawyer looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. Then, the judge did something I wasn't expecting. Mr. Ryan, he said, turning his attention to me, you've been accused of neglect in this marriage. Is there anything you'd like to say in response? I stood up, my heart pounding but my voice steady. Your Honor, neglect is a strong word. I may not have been perfect, but I gave everything I had to this marriage. I worked long hours to provide for us, not because I wanted to be away from Sophia, but because I believed in building a life together. I wasn't the one who spent weekends with someone else while my spouse thought I was working late. I wasn't the one who siphoned money from our joint account to fund a secret life. And I certainly wasn't the one who decided that my partner was disposable. I paused, letting my words sink in. Sophia looked down at her hands, her face unreadable. The truth is, I continued, I loved Sophia. I loved her enough to sacrifice my own happiness for hers. But love isn't enough when it's one-sided. And no matter how much I gave, it was never going to be enough for her. That's not neglect, that's reality. The courtroom was silent. Even the gallery, which had been buzzing with murmurs earlier, seemed to be holding its breath. The judge leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Thank you, Mr. Ryan. You may sit. As I returned to my seat, Claire gave me a small nod of approval. The rest of the session was a blur of legal jargon and procedural motions, but I could feel the shift. The balance of power had tipped, and for the first time in this entire ordeal, it wasn't in Sophia's favor. When the judge called for an adjournment, he turned to Sophia. "Mrs. Sophia, the evidence against you is compelling. I would advise you to carefully consider your next steps before we reconvene." Her face was a mix of anger and fear as she nodded stiffly. As we left the courtroom, Claire turned to me with a rare smile. "You've got them on the ropes," she said. I nodded, but I didn't let myself celebrate just yet. There was still work to be done, still a decision to be made. But for the first time, I felt like I was winning. And that felt pretty damn good. The day Sophia's carefully crafted facade crumbled completely wasn't some grand, dramatic showdown. It was quieter, more devastating, and infinitely more satisfying. The courtroom felt unusually charged when the session resumed. Sophia's lawyer had clearly spent the night scrambling to salvage their case. They shuffled papers, whispered furiously with her, and occasionally shot me and Claire glares that could have melted steel. I sat back, arms crossed, watching it all unfold. Sophia, for all her usual poise, was visibly unraveling. Her makeup was flawless, as always, but her posture betrayed her. She sat hunched, her eyes darting nervously to the judge, to me, and even to the gallery behind us. The woman who had mocked me with the workhorse comment just days ago now looked like someone walking a tightrope over an abyss. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. He wasted no time. "Before we proceed further, I have reviewed the evidence submitted by the plaintiff, including financial records, correspondence, and testimony from third parties. It is clear that Mrs. Sophia has engaged in behavior detrimental to the integrity of this marriage." Sophia's head snapped up, her lawyer's whispered warning clearly ignored. The judge wasn't done. "This includes but is not limited to siphoning funds from a joint account, engaging in extramarital affairs, and attempting to misrepresent Mr. Ryan's contributions during these proceedings." You could have heard a pin drop. Sophia's face was pale, her lips trembling as though she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. "Mrs. Sophia," the judge continued, his tone stern, "your actions not only undermine your claims but also paint a picture of significant misconduct on your part. This court does not look kindly upon such behavior." And there it was, the moment her carefully curated image shattered. The gallery was buzzing with whispers. Even Sophia's lawyer looked like they wanted to sink through the floor. But the best part? I hadn't even needed to lift a finger. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Ryan, given the evidence presented, this court finds your claims of financial and emotional exploitation to be credible. Furthermore, you have demonstrated remarkable composure and integrity throughout these proceedings." I nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral, but inside, I felt a surge of vindication. Years of being belittled, of questioning my worth, of feeling like I wasn't enough. It all came rushing back, only to be replaced by something I hadn't felt in a long time: pride. The next few minutes were a blur of legal formalities. The judge outlined the financial penalties Sophia would face, including restitution of the funds she'd stolen and a significant portion of the marital assets being awarded to me. And then came the final blow. "Mrs. Sophia," the judge said, leaning forward slightly, "this court recognizes the harm your actions have caused not only to Mr. Ryan but also to the integrity of this union. I would advise you to reflect deeply on the choices that brought you to this point." Sophia looked like she might cry, but she didn't. Instead, she sat there, shoulders slumped, her once unshakable confidence reduced to ashes. As the judge adjourned the session, Sophia's lawyer turned to her, speaking in hushed tones. I caught snippets of the conversation, words like reputation and damage control. She didn't look at me as I gathered my things to leave, but as I walked past her table, I couldn't resist stopping. I leaned in, just enough for her to hear me. "Workhorse, huh?" I said, my voice low and calm. "Looks like this workhorse just lapped you." She didn't respond, didn't even lift her head. For the first time, she had no words. As I walked out of the courtroom, Claire caught up with me, a rare grin on her face. "You should have seen her expression when the judge listed the penalties," she said. I laughed, a real, genuine laugh. For the first time in what felt like years, I wasn't carrying the weight of her mockery, her manipulation, or her betrayal. I was free. Outside, the air was crisp, the sun shining brighter than it had in months. I paused on the steps of the courthouse, taking it all in. Sophia thought she could humiliate me, break me, and walk away with everything I'd worked for. Instead, she was the one walking away empty-handed, her mask torn off for everyone to see. And me? I was just getting started. Walking out of that courthouse felt like shedding a heavy coat in the middle of a heat wave. For the first time in years, I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders. The sting of Sophia's betrayal was still there, but it wasn't the sharp pain it had been. Now, it felt like a bruise, tender but healing. Claire walked beside me, going over the next steps in the divorce process, but honestly, I wasn't listening. My mind was already ahead, thinking about what my life could look like without Sophia in it. For years, my world had revolved around her needs, her wants, her endless demands. Now, I had the chance to ask myself, what do I want? That question lingered in my mind as I started rebuilding. The first step was simple but symbolic. I cleared out every trace of Sophia from my life. Her clothes, her shoes, the ridiculous decor she insisted on buying. All of it went into boxes. It was strange, watching the space transform as I reclaimed it. The living room felt bigger without her oversized furniture. The walls felt brighter without her pretentious art pieces. For the first time, the apartment felt like mine. I kept a few things, though. The practical stuff. Dishes, towels, furniture that actually served a purpose. But the rest? I donated it or tossed it without a second thought. I didn't want any reminders of the life we'd built, or more accurately, the life I'd carried while she decorated. My second step was even more personal. I dug through my closet and found my old sketchbook, the one I hadn't touched in years. Back before the overtime hours, before the endless demands of Sophia's lifestyle, I used to draw. Nothing fancy, just landscapes and cityscapes I'd see on my way to work. It was my way of relaxing, of letting my mind wander. Sophia had laughed at it once, calling it a childish hobby. I remember the way her voice dripped with condescension as she asked, "Why waste time on something that doesn't make money?" I'd put the sketchbook away after that. But now I opened it up and started drawing again. At first, my lines were shaky, my hand unsteady from years of neglect. But as the days passed, the muscle memory came back. Each sketch felt like reclaiming a part of myself Sophia had tried to bury. I also reconnected with old friends, the ones I drifted away from during my marriage. It was humbling to admit how isolated I'd become, but their responses were nothing but supportive. One friend, Jake, invited me out for a drink and said, "We were waiting for you to wake up, man. You deserve better than what she gave you." Those nights out, those conversations, they reminded me of who I used to be before I became Sophia's husband. I wasn't just the guy who worked late and paid the bills. I was Ryan, the friend, the artist, the guy who loved bad movies and long hikes. Work became easier, too. Without Sophia draining me emotionally and financially, I had more energy to focus on my career. My boss noticed the change and even commented on how productive I'd become. It felt good to be recognized for something other than my ability to endure. And then, there was the gym. I hadn't realized how much stress I'd been carrying until I started lifting weights again. Every rep, every mile on the treadmill, felt like I was exorcising the ghosts of my marriage. My body changed quickly. Years of manual labor had given me a solid foundation, and it didn't take long for the results to show. I didn't do it to spite Sophia, though I'd be lying if I said the thought of her seeing me now didn't bring a little satisfaction. I did it for me, to feel strong again, to remind myself that I wasn't just a workhorse. One night, as I stood in front of the mirror, I barely recognized the man staring back at me, not just because of the physical changes, but because of the confidence in his eyes. I wasn't the same Ryan who'd walked into that courtroom weeks ago, burdened by years of Sophia's insults and manipulation. I was someone new, someone better. The final step in my redemption was forgiveness, not for Sophia, but for myself. For years, I'd blamed myself for the failures in our marriage, for not being enough, for not seeing the signs sooner. But standing in my reclaimed apartment, surrounded by the life I was rebuilding, I realized something important. I wasn't the problem. Sophia's betrayal wasn't about me. It was about her greed, her selfishness, her inability to appreciate what she had. And once I understood that, I stopped carrying the guilt. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry. I was free. The final court session wasn't the cinematic climax you'd expect. There were no explosive arguments, no tears, or dramatic confessions. Instead, it was clinical, procedural, and eerily quiet. I think that's what made it more impactful. Sophia wasn't the firebrand she'd been in earlier hearings. She didn't mock me or hurl insults. She just sat there, subdued, her face a mask of resignation. The judge read out the final decision, his tone firm but impartial. This court recognizes that Mr. Ryan has provided ample evidence of financial and emotional contributions during the marriage, while Mrs. Sophia's actions have demonstrated significant misconduct. As such, the marital assets will be divided in favor of Mr. Ryan, who will retain the apartment, as well as restitution for funds taken without his consent. I kept my eyes forward, not daring to glance at Sophia. I didn't want to see her reaction. Not yet. The judge continued. This court also orders the dissolution of the marriage between Mr. Ryan and Mrs. Sophia. The divorce is finalized as of today. Both parties are advised to move forward amicably and respectfully. And just like that, it was over. When the judge dismissed us, I stood, my legs feeling heavier than they should have. I grabbed my briefcase and turned to leave, but then something stopped me. Maybe it was the finality of the moment, or maybe it was the sense that I needed to close this chapter properly for my own peace of mind. I turned back to Sophia. She was still seated, staring at the table in front of her. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Sophia," I said, my voice low but steady. She looked up, her eyes searching mine. For a second, I saw a flicker of something. Regret, maybe, or realization. "What?" she asked, her voice soft, almost defeated. "I just wanted to say goodbye," I said. "Not because I owe you anything, but because I need to. This is the last time we'll see each other, and I want you to know something." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't interrupt. "I don't hate you," I continued. "I thought I would. I thought I'd spend the rest of my life hating you for everything you did. For the lies, the betrayal, the way you made me feel like I was never enough. But I don't." Her expression softened, but I didn't let it sway me. "What I feel for you now isn't hatred or love. It's indifference. And that's what freedom feels like, Sophia. I'm finally free of you, of us, of everything you made me carry. I hope one day you find whatever it is you're looking for, but I won't be a part of it." She opened her mouth as if to say something, but no words came. For the first time, Sophia had nothing to say. I turned and walked out of the courtroom, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the silence. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. As I stepped outside, the air hit me like a breath of fresh life. Claire was waiting for me, her usual composed demeanor slightly softened by a small smile. "It's done," she said simply. "It is," I replied, and for the first time, I felt the full weight of those words. It was done. Over. Finished. We walked down the courthouse steps together, and I couldn't help but notice how much lighter I felt. The world seemed brighter, the air crisper. Even the sound of the city around me felt more alive. Claire stopped at the curb, turning to me. "You did well, Ryan. You handled this with dignity, and that's not something everyone can say." "Thanks, Claire," I said. "For everything." She nodded and gave me a quick handshake before heading off, leaving me to stand there, alone but not lonely. I took a deep breath and looked up at the sky. The future stretched out before me, a blank canvas waiting to be filled. There would be challenges, sure. Healing wasn't an overnight process. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my life. My choices were my own, and no one could take that from me. As I walked away from the courthouse, I felt a small smile tug at my lips. This wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning, and I was ready for whatever came next. The first few days after the divorce were surreal. It wasn't like I woke up feeling like a new man, free of all the baggage and pain Sophia had left behind. Healing isn't instant. But there was this quiet realization. This understanding that the life I had ahead of me was mine to shape. And that was enough to get me out of bed with a little more purpose each day. The apartment felt different now. Without Sophia's presence, it was quieter. Emptier, sure, but it wasn't the hollow kind of emptiness. It was the good kind, the kind that left room to breathe. I started to see this space as a blank slate, just like my life. I spent my first weekend post-divorce redecorating. Nothing drastic. I didn't have the budget for that yet, but enough to make the place feel like home again. I moved the couch to a new spot, replaced the garish paintings Sophia had insisted on with my own sketches, and swapped out the heavy curtains for something lighter. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The first night I sat down in my new apartment, something clicked. I looked around and realized this wasn't just a place to sleep anymore. It was a symbol of what I'd reclaimed. Sophia had tried to take it, just like she tried to take everything else. But she failed. And now, this space was a reflection of me, not her. Work was another area where I felt the shift. Without the constant stress of Sophia's demands and manipulation hanging over me, I found myself focusing better. My productivity shot up, and my boss noticed. One day, he pulled me aside and said, "Ryan, you seem sharper lately. Whatever you're doing, keep it up." That conversation led to an opportunity, a promotion, something I never would have had the energy or confidence to pursue while I was stuck in Sophia's shadow. It wasn't just about the extra money. It was about proving to myself that I was capable of more than being the man she'd made me believe I was. But the biggest change came in how I viewed myself. For years, I'd let Sophia's words define me. "You're not enough. You're a failure. You're just a workhorse." Those phrases had played on a loop in my mind for so long that I'd started to believe them. Not anymore. Every step I took toward rebuilding my life, whether it was redecorating, working harder, or simply spending time with friends, was like a hammer chipping away at those lies. I wasn't a workhorse. I was a man who had endured, survived, and come out stronger on the other side. One day, I found myself standing in front of the mirror, shirtless, looking at the scars and calluses Sophia had once mocked. But instead of seeing flaws, I saw stories. I saw the years of hard work that had kept us afloat, the sacrifices I'd made, and the strength it had taken to walk away. Those marks weren't signs of failure. They were badges of resilience. The calls and texts from Sophia started about 2 weeks after the final hearing. At first, they were cold and transactional, questions about when she could pick up the last of her things. Then they became something else. "Ryan, I've been thinking a lot about us," one text read. "Can we talk?" I didn't respond. What was there to talk about? She'd made her choice and I'd made mine. There was no going back. Another message came a few days later. "I miss you. Maybe we rush things." This one made me laugh. Not out of cruelty, but because of how predictable it was. Sophia had spent years taking me for granted, assuming I'd always be there. And now that she realized she'd been wrong, she wanted a do-over. But I wasn't the same Ryan she'd walked all over. I didn't need her validation anymore. I didn't need her at all. Instead of replying, I blocked her number. That act, as simple as it was, felt like closing the door on a chapter of my life I never wanted to revisit. One evening, as I sat on the couch sketching, I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the humiliation, the fight to reclaim what was mine. It had been a storm, no doubt about it. But storms clear the air, and in their aftermath, things grow. I'd grown. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. I wasn't defined by Sophia's insults or her betrayal. I was defined by what I'd done in response, how I'd stood my ground, fought for myself, and come out stronger. As I set my sketch pad aside and looked out at the city lights through my newly hung curtains, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. This was my life now, simple, quiet, and entirely mine. And for the first time, that was more than enough.